Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Open Mic Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. This podcast is here for everybody on the open mic comedy circuit, whether you're a comedian, an MC, a promoter, or a tutor, and even comedy fans who enjoy watching the stars of the future in the pub basements around the world. If you're thinking I could do that, then this podcast will guide you on what to expect on this crazy circuit from those right in the middle of it. Today's guest has a very impressive CV. If you see him with a suitcase, it doesn't necessarily mean he is traveling. It is the prop master of all. Please welcome to the stage. It's Mr. Neil Benn.
Yay! Oh, that's the best introduction I've had for almost, 3 minutes?
How are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, it's getting over Christmas and New Year and stuff. It's that time of year, January. I know you could be watching this in June. Yeah, But we've just had Christmas and there's still a little bit of snow on my car and frost. It's that cold outside.
Yeah.
But I'm all right.
We're actually recording this on the anniversary of the podcast releasing its first ever episode.
Wow. Well, I would sing happy birthday, but you wouldn't want that.
No. But I mean, you're quite a man of many talents, really, aren't you?
Well, thank you. People don't realize that when I walk in to a gig and do my 5 or 7 or 10 or 15 or sometimes 1 hour, 55-minute show. I'm up to that, one-man shows. That they don't realize that actually this comedy thing that I'm doing right now is, I've been doing 6 or 7 years. I've got a 30-plus year career working in TV, writing and directing, kids, educational. I started out in the late 80s writing sketches for Dick and Dom. Do you remember them? Dick and Dom in the Bungalow. They had a show called The Friday Show, and I was writing sketches for them. That's kind of, and then went on to work for BBC Schools, making education programs, but always using comedy, sketches, drama to teach kids. BAFTA nominated. There is a certificate there, but you won't see it. But yeah, and So really, comedy, as in the open mic circuit, is just like a little kind of sideline.
That's the thing I find amazing. People that have listened to this regularly will kind of hear me wax lyrical about things like this, is that I'm speaking to people that I've met for a few nights in a year, said hello to, and you've just seen them do 5 or 10 minutes or whatever. But there's so much more history that goes on behind the scenes, and what some people have achieved is just, and you look at some people and go, you've been in films. Why are you doing 5 minutes on a stage and open mic? It's weird.
Well, do you want me to answer that question?
Go for it.
I do it because with stand-up comedy, you get immediate feedback on whether you and your material is funny. When I'm writing a sketch or a TV thing, I can write it and I can, in my heart, know it's funny, but I don't know it's funny until it's made. And it can take months, if not years, to get something made and in front of an audience. And I'm not even sitting with the audience when they're watching it. So I don't know if they know it funny. Yeah, commissioning editors or producers or execs can give me reactions and stuff, and other script writers and editors. But with stand-up comedy, it is immediate. You know, if your delivery has worked and your joke has worked and the audience is in the right mood. And that I use because that feeds into my writing. It's like, that's funny. And it keeps my funny bones kind of in check and exercised, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So what made you decide to take, I won't say it's a leap, but change from, well, not change, but you've been doing the stuff behind the camera and the writing to then going, I'm going to put myself on stage front and center.
Well, actually, my very first comedy gig was in 1983. I was at uni at Brunel and we did a talent competition. And somebody said to me, "You're funny, Neil, do some jokes." So I got up on stage and I came second in the talent competition. And I only, and the act that won it was a band and they were brilliant, so it wasn't just comedy, it was all different. But then I was asked to do another gig, which I did, and that went really well. And then here's this. I was asked to do the warm-up for when Lenny Henry came to the university. So I got to do the warm-up for Lenny. It went a little bit like this. Welcome on stage, Mr. Lenny Henry. I mean, that was it. I say it was warm-up. And the thing is, you know how tall I am. Look, I'm 5 foot tall. Lenny Henry's about 6'15".
Yeah.
And I left the mic at my height, and he walked on stage, and it came up to about here on him. And the first thing he said was, "Who was that short ass?" So Lenny Henry has called me a short ass. So that's when I started. But then I got into kids' theatre. I worked at Graham Ormond Street Hospital Radio, got into telly, and didn't do any stand-up. But I really enjoyed musical theatre, performing and directing. And I would always go for the comedy characters because that's just in me. But it got to a point about 6 or 7 years ago when I'm of a certain age where I don't dance as well as I used to. And although I can still do great comedy characters, there are younger, fitter, better looking, taller actors out there who were getting the parts that I loved to do. And I was getting frustrated. So one of my friends, a chap called Russell Stratton, who's an amazing musical theatre performer, he said, "Neil, I've just done Logan Murray's comedy course. I'm sure you've heard of Logan Murray.
Yeah.
Why don't you do it? Go and do some stand-up." So I went and signed up to do his course because I thought, do you know what? I can write my own stuff. I can direct myself and I can perform it. And no one's going to tell me I can't do it, or no one's going to not cast me. So it's just down to me. So again, another friend of mine had done Logan Murray's course, said after he did the course, he booked 10 open mic slots. Yeah. I didn't do that. I decided that as I was going to start the course, I was going to do 1 gig a week during the course. So my first ever gig after, university some years ago was downstairs at the King's Head, Crouch End. And I did a 5-minute slot there. I ended up doing 13 gigs over the 12-week period of the course. So when it came to the showcase, everybody who'd done the course who hadn't done any were all kind of, what's going on? And I just strolled on stage and just did my stuff, So and that's how it kind of started.
That's interesting. With the I know of a few people that have done some of the courses and they've tried to do stand-ups as they go along, but I guess there's more people that don't do that than
I guess I'm lucky because I have been writing for a long time and working in and around comedy and using comedy, so I kind of know what works and I know how to structure a set, and on top of that, having performed a lot of musical theatre and comedy parts on stage, I wasn't scared of being on stage. And I'd emceed a few events, as in not in comedy events, but kind of charity events. And I've held a microphone and I've been on stage and I'm not shy. So I didn't have that to push through. It was just whether I could deliver the jokes the way I wanted to and react to the audience. And we might touch on this later, but right at the beginning of the comedy stuff, it's like, you're a joke delivery system. You're not a comedian. Yeah. So I was that, but it didn't take me that long to shift.
Oh, that's quite interesting. So when you talk about directing yourself, from somebody who is a director to looking at how you do your things on stage to somebody who's not a director like me and looks at how I do things on stage, is there something else different that you do that, say, somebody like myself probably doesn't do?
I think most of it is intuitive because I've been doing it for so long. So it's not necessarily conscious. But the big thing, I think, is pacing. And I don't mean pacing as in pacing up and down. I mean the pacing and rhythm and allowing the audience a chance to keep up with you or go with you on the journey. So, yes, and this is why I say joke delivery system comedian. As a joke delivery system, which is most open micers when they start out, they've written their set, they just deliver it, right? And it's fine and you'll get some laughs, but it's not the same as someone who is performing and allowing the audience time and bouncing off the audience. And I don't necessarily mean crowd work, but it's like allowing the audience a chance to laugh and knowing when they laugh going to laugh, and then nudging and weaving with it. And so as a director, I've written a script, I've written some ideas, and then I perform it. I practice. I've got a microphone myself. I practice or rehearse and stuff like that. And I feel it. And sometimes it's about, do you know what? I need to put something physical in here, or I need
Yeah.
to have a reaction. And and this is something about acting, which could be really good in comedy. Great actors are the ones that can react, not necessarily act. So a lot of actors will do their lines and deliver them brilliantly. The real quality, excellent actors are the ones that are still acting and reacting to what the other actors are doing when they don't have any lines or they don't have any direction. So I am reacting to the audience.
Yeah.
And that's what I add in. So if the audience do something, I've had times when I've been really lucky. I've not had any really horrible heckling, but I've had people shout stuff out because they've got so into the act. So I was doing a gig once, and there was this sweet little man in his 60s, which, bless him, I think he was kind of moving into dementia, but really sweet, lovely. And he kept shouting out my punchlines before I got them, because you've seen my comedy. They're really silly, childish, and he so got into it. So in the end, I just sat next to him and I said, okay, let's do this together.
Oh, excellent.
And I went with it, and it was quite fun. It's sweet. So it's allowing those moments to inform the way you're going to perform it. So don't be rigid in the performance.
Yeah.
So as a director, I'm comfortable to think on the spot really quickly, just like that, to go with it.
Yeah, I guess there's part of it when you're starting out, like you say, you're reciting a script as such, and you may create 5 minutes of material. So when you practice it, it's 5 minutes worth of words, but in reality, that's probably 6 or 7 minutes of stage time, because you need to allow those pauses, those reflections, and allow for any interactions. Because I think some of the worst things, and we're all guilty of it, especially those at the start, is when something happens in a room, you just ignore it and carry on with your bit.
Well, I've got my prop box with stuff in it, and it's always the same props. And I'm adding some and swatching around. I've done gigs with exactly the same props and jokes, and I've run out of props in 8 minutes. Or I'm still going 15 minutes later and I've got 3 or 4 props still in the box. And that's all down to the audience and how I work with the audience. It could be that different.
So what would you say your best and worst moments you've had on stage so far have been?
Well, I can tell you about certain gigs, which I'm sure many open mic comedians can relate to. The worst kind of gigs is when you turn up and there are 8 people in the audience and 7 of them are fellow comedians. Those are really difficult because, and I've done a lot of them early on in my open mic career, and a lot of the comedians, they're just head down, working on their material, waiting for their spot so they can just get up. And what makes it even worse is the one person that isn't a comedian is my friend that I brought along, and they're all picking on him. So that kind of is quite difficult. But what I do is I come on stage with so much energy that the comedians have to sit up and look because they can't keep their heads down. I did another gig a while ago, which was at a festival, an afternoon slot in a tent. And it was meant to be in a tent because some of the comedians were a little bit rude. Right. So it was separate from, it was a family day, but they had benches in it and picnic tables. And there was a family sitting at one of the picnic tables right at the front and refused to move because that was where they were sitting. My stuff is fairly family friendly, but there were the MC, his style was shocking. That's kind of quite shocking. And he couldn't hold the audience, and he couldn't hold the gig. And that was really, really difficult gig. One of the best gigs I've done, I did a one-man show as part of the Watford Festival. It was called Around the World in 80 Puns. And basically it was 55 minutes of visual puns, one-liners, prop punk comedy. And in 55 minutes, I did 172 puns. So I had a pun monitor with a punometer. So every time I did a pun, she would click it. The moment I started, people were laughing, and they didn't stop until I finished 55 minutes later. And that was just like I was on such a roll. The room was full. I mean, it was done in the bar at Watford Palace Theatre, and they were meant to hold 44. They squeezed another 8 in standing at the back.
Yeah.
And that was just like, I was on a roll. That was just so much fun. I would say that was my best gig.
With that Watford festival then, when you was that the first time you've created a near on hour long show?
No, I've done it. I did another one a few years back. I've done it a couple of times called Life from Low Angle. So I did a one-man show which was based on being short and working in telly and being a single dad.
Yeah.
So that was very much storytelling, because you probably know me, and more recently, about the prop puns and the one-liners and stuff, which is what I love doing. But I did start off, when I started doing comedy, doing more storytelling type comedy, a little bit like Ronnie Corbett did when he sat down, and these long winding stories that weave all over the place. And that's what I started doing. And so Life at Low Angle was more that kind of comedy, telling stories about my kids and bringing them up, and single dad and working in telly and all that kind of stuff, and less of the one-liners. Whereas Around the World in 80 Puns was one-liner after one-liner after one-liner, and it's called Round the World in 80 Days because I played a character. So one of my gags is, I got so excited the other day, I bumped into my doppelganger. I was beside myself. So and then I said, would you like to meet him? And I walked behind, I had this flat. So I walked behind the flat, and I put an explorer's hat on and an explorer's coat on, and I come around. And then, so I'm doing the show as me and this character as Hillary Edmonds or Hillary. I got not. It's basically not. It's either Hillary Edmonds or Edmonds Hillary, but not the explorer I played on that CBE PTO RSVP. And I've got this big map of the world. It's a kid's map with lots of little icons of things like the Eiffel Tower and all landmarks across the world. I've got a pun for every single one of them. So we go around the world. But I couldn't do that, 80 of them, all in one go. So I do that, and then I hand back to me, and then I hand back to Sir Edmund, and I hand back to me, and I bounce between the two.
Okay. So, yeah, because when we gigged together just before Christmas last year in 24, and it was interesting to see you do traditional stand-up.
Yeah.
When I'd never seen you do it before. I've always seen you with the suitcase and using the props, and then just seeing the other side to yourself was it was nice and refreshing in a strange way. It's like, this is not a one-dimensional comedy act.
No, somebody said to me, because also, I love Carl and G&B comedy, and he does kind of the musical nights or out your comfort zone evenings.
Yeah.
And I did an out of your comfort zone, and I did a musical song. So, I can do a comedy song. So somebody said to me a while ago, Neil, you're not just a comedian, you're a bit of an entertainer, because you do all different things. The prop pun stuff is what I love doing. I love writing them. And I love the childish simplicity of them. And because it's not political, it's not sexist, it's not anything, it's non-offensive funny, and it can fit in any bill. And I've not seen many people do what I do. So again, it's got that uniqueness to it.
Yeah, very much so. Can you remember the first ever joke you wrote for the stage?
No. No, because maybe because So am I thinking back to 7 years ago when I did The King's Head, or am I thinking to 1983-4 when I did Brunel University comedy show? I remember doing stuff about being. It was a gag, but not a joke. So when I did the gig at Brunel, I walked on stage with a guitar. strung around my shoulders in front of me. Did the whole gig without mentioning or doing anything with the guitar. And at the end, I said, "Oh, the guitar, not mine." Stagehand passed it to me when I came on, said, "Just keep it on." I take it off, and there's a massive hole in my trousers where my crotch is. So even then, I was doing visual comedy.
I love that idea. You walk on and everyone's expecting something and you just don't give it to them. And then I guess everybody is going, well, when's he going to start playing this thing?
Yeah.
And I guess it keeps everybody kind of weirdly entertained for that.
That's kind of, I just realized that because I didn't remember that. But yeah, that's how my mind works. I like to pull people down a cul-de-sac and give them something, get them to expect something and then give them something completely different. And that's, for me, that's what comedy is.
What about a first joke when you took to the stage at the King's Head, or one of the jokes?
I did a routine about, and it kind of still appears in a little bit in what I do. I did a routine about dating a tall woman. You know, I'm 5 foot tall, and it's not often I can find a partner about my height. So I tend to, but in terms of comedy, I exaggerate it. So I did this routine about dating a woman that was 6'6" and end up suffocating every time she hugged me, but what a way to go. I can't remember the details of it, but it was that kind of thing. But it's evolved into a way more sophisticated thing. I also did, actually, because I talked about my writing in telly and kind of bragged that, you know, that I wrote one of Blue Peter's Christmas pantomimes. And I said, "Oh, no, I didn't." And they said, "Oh, yes, you did." I said, "So, now you believe me."
Greetings, listener. Sorry for the interruption. It's John the Pape from episode 41. If, like me, you're loving this episode, in the hot tub with 9 merchant sailors, listen to your higher self, consider giving it a 5-star rating, and follow the pod on whatever app you're using. It's the right thing to do, right, lads? And Mark will be forever grateful. Now, our helicopter has arrived, so I must beg your leave, but please enjoy the rest of this absolute humdinger of an episode.
I guess with joke writing then, what's the inspiration? Is it just things that are around you?
I listen. For me, it's listening and playing around. So I'll hear a phrase. I don't, because most of my time is writing TV scripts at the moment. I'm developing a drama at the moment with the BBC. I've got a comedy drama I'm developing. So most of my writing is TV focused, but my mind is always open to another physical visual gag. So I will listen. If I'm kind of saying, okay, I want to write 2 or 3 more of these kind of visual puns, I maybe research some catchphrases or things that people expect and see what jumps out. But I just listen to things. So I've got a new joke that I came up with the other day, and it's connected with my cases and stuff. And I'm not going to give it away because I will perform it at my next act. And it's just so silly, and it will get, and it's like, I hear a phrase and think, yeah, I can do that, you know. So, I'm just, so, you know, and I'm going to go on my phone because I've got on my phone a little notes. So I keep notes of ideas and one-liners. So I do a lot of my other girlfriend jokes. You know, when I'm doing my one-line, I start off with the Polly joke, which, to be honest, you know, Polygon is one of my favorite jokes now. It sets up me as a character. It sets up my style, and it then sets up this thing that I like dating girls, you know. So every so often I get another one jumping to my mouth. You know, my other girlfriend is a spiritual medium. When I told her I was dying to meet her, she said she'd wait. You know, it's like the playing with words. My other girlfriend is a very demanding PT instructor. She has me running in circles around her. You know, it's just silly, and it's playing with words. and so that's kind of what happens. I'll hear a phrase and it might be a way to weave it in.
Yeah. I always remember when I first saw you and you go, my girlfriend, and then my other girlfriend, and then my other girlfriend.
I have to thank Milton Jones because he does my granddad, my other granddad. So I have to kind of dock the cat to Milton. So I'm not copying him, but I'm taking that kind of structure from what he does because, And also that plays on the fact that people look at me and they think short, quirky looking bloke probably doesn't have many girlfriends and poor little lads and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And again, that kind of goes against what they're thinking. Again, that makes it more fun.
Yeah. So what would you say your favorite joke is?
I kind of meant that the Polygon story. Now that but that started off as a 4 or 5 minute story about me standing on a chair having my profile picture taken, because that way, unless a woman swiped up or down, she'd never know how short I was until we met. And it kind of grew and grew, and then I matched with this. So I matched with this lovely girl called Polly, who said she liked to have a laugh, so we agreed to go and see some comedy. And then it just wove on and on and on about how she did the same photographic trick that I had, but she'd stood in a ditch, not on a chair, and she was 6'3". And it was like, and it was about comedy, and then we go to see the comedy, and I end up sitting on her lap, and the MC mistook us for a ventriloquist act, and then, and it just weaves around all over, and it ends at the end, and I said, I got home and I told my kids I was so excited. I got a new girlfriend. My daughter was so excited she drew me a picture, me and Polly. And then I take out the picture that you've seen many times of me standing on a box holding Polly's hand with a circle and lots of hearts around it. My daughter drew me another picture a couple of weeks later. No circle of love, just a polygon. That was the end of a 4-minute sequence. I had a few other visual puns like that. And it was after doing the out your comfort zone thing with G&B, when I did my musical song, I got a standing ovation for that, by the way.
Well done.
And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try and get all the kind of visual puns that I've got with Polygon and some others. Others I was feeding them in, and see if I can do 5 minutes of it. And I did 5 minutes of it again at G&B, and Carl came up to me and said, Neil, that's your style, just like that. And it's grown.
I guess that is the biggest shift, because the general question I like to ask is, how did you come up with a joke, and has it evolved? Yeah. And yours has massively evolved to...
I loved one-liners, so I did write one-liners, and I did do one-liner gags. But it was really difficult for me to find a way to do the storytelling and the one-liners. They kind of jarred. Whereas going to the prop stuff, I can do the one-liners because my jokes are so short. My shortest joke is one word.
Yes, I remember this. I can't remember what it was, but I remember we were talking about this at a gig once.
Well, it's 3 words, to be honest. I hold up the stuffed toy duck. I say, what's this? Someone shouts duck, and I shout duck back and throw it at them.
Yeah.
You can't get much shorter than that.
No.
But it also enables me to do slightly longer jokes, but in the same kind of style. So, yeah.
Yeah. On to the actual open mic circuit itself. How do you find it and stuff?
Early on, I would do 2 or 3 gigs a week. I really wanted to get a lot under my belt. But I live out in, I've moved in further, but I live out in Watford. So it was a lot of traveling in and out of London. And when I was enthusiastic and it was going really well, and this was pre-COVID, very happy to do it because I was getting some momentum going. I think COVID really kind of knocked a lot of things, and I had some health issues I had to deal with, and I didn't feel as confident or as happy to go in and out of London just for 5 minutes. But I was getting to the point where I was being asked to headline or do longer sets than 10 minutes. I find traveling north or east or west rather than south, I get longer slots. There's a great gig run by Des Free in St Albans that I
Yeah.
do, another one in Potter's Bar, I get 10, 12 minutes.
Yeah.
It's more relaxed. I've gone up to Coventry and Birmingham, Leicester and stuff like that. And in a funny kind of way, it doesn't take that much longer to go that way from where I am than into London. So I know there's a big thing about bringers and stuff, and everyone has an opinion about. I think they work early on in a career, and I did a lot. I did the Comedy Virgins, I did TNT, stuff like that, and I think it's just something you have to do, and you have to suck it up until you get to a level where you're asked to headline or you're asked to open or close a half. And that sense, you don't need to be a bringer. And it's like, it's just part of the process. And if you're serious about it, you just have to suck it up and do it. And if you're not, because there's nothing worse. Like I said, one of my worst gigs is when I sat in a room with 700 comedians and one audience member. And it's like soul destroying. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think there's very much a comedy dynamic in London that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The whole bringer thing has to kind of exist in London because there are so many people doing it. There are so many nights going on, and to squeeze as many acts on as they can, and get the audience in. Whereas when you go outside of London, because people don't get to see comedy every single day.
Yeah, but there's the opposite side. I did a gig in Birmingham, and everyone was given 10 minutes, right? Even people who were shocking had 10 minutes. And at least with 5 minutes, it's going to be over soon, and you can learn. And the thing is, that was harder. I came in and in my usual way, brought the house down. Sorry, ego. No, I got a few laughs. Whereas, sometimes people come on stage and think an attitude is funnier than material.
Yeah.
The way they deliver. Or I had this one guy saying, tortoises, they're funny, fuck them. And it was that kind of, there was no joke in it, but it was like, but they thought that was funny because they'd seen other people do it. One guy did 10 minutes of stuff like that. And it was just like, I'm dying in my seat. I'm wanting to pull my hoodie over me and disappear. So you get that. So you get the opposite than London if you go further out.
So what's the positives you see from the open mic circuit then?
What I really like about it is the camaraderie. You get comedians of all different experiences, and they're willing to offer support, advice. So I have comedians who are just starting out who want to chat with me about stuff, and they got some ideas, and they say, what can I do to ... And because they can see that I'm doing it, and I often chat to a comedian beforehand, and they all say, oh, is this your first gig? And I said, no, I've probably done 300 or 400, and and I'm headlining. And it's like, well, let me know what you think in my set, So if they give me permission, so things like, I really like your material, but when you were pacing up and down, I found that very distracting. So try and keep your feet on the ground. Don't even take the microphone off the stand. Hold the stand, and that will be easier to focus on your joke. Or I always find something positive to say, and then something that will help them. So I like that. And I've had that said to me as well, so I love the fact that you get people of all different experiences willing and offer. Now, sometimes you get unsolicited advice, which isn't, and sometimes I've had people come up to me and say, oh, I've got this brilliant joke for you, and I'll always listen. I'm always polite and I always nod. And sometimes it is brilliant and sometimes it isn't, but I think in my experience, female comedians have that tougher because a lot of male comedians come up to female comedians with an excuse and say, I've got a joke for you. And of course, it's just a bit of
the unsolicited advice is always a very touchy subject. I always think if somebody's willing to give you some advice that's genuine, then always listen. Whether you agree with it, take it on board or disregard it.
I don't give it unless it's asked for. Or if I've seen something that was really good, I will always come in and say, I really loved it when you ...
Yeah.
And then I might put, but that bit didn't work for me. But if you did it like this, I think it'd be brilliant. You know.
Yeah, I've had people come up to me and say to me that on one of my earlier sets that the second to last punchline finish was much stronger than the one I finish on, and he said I would consider removing that last bit. And I always thought, no, I love the last joke more than the second to last joke, but the audience doesn't love it as much. And ultimately, you want to please yourself, but if you get the reaction you want from the audience that makes you feel better, because then you end on that high with them wanting more and stop rather than you bring them back down.
Here's the thing, and what you've just said. So here's some feedback. No, I learned very early on in my TV career to be willing to let go of stuff that is important to you, if that is for the benefit of the program. So before I actually got into TV, I trailed a producer on Blue Peter who had worked like 3 weeks on this 3-minute sequence on canal boats with one of the presenters. And with Blue Peter, they used to transmit it live, but earlier in the afternoon, they did a rehearsal as if it was live.
Oh, okay.
And the program was 3 minutes long. And Lewis Bronze turned to the producer, Richard, and said, Richard, I'm losing your sequence. And I went to Richard. I said, Richard, you just spent 3 weeks on that. Aren't you upset? And he said, no, it's for the best thing for the program. Yeah. So I learned straight away. So sometimes holding on to something, even though you really like it, that's not working, is defeating the object. So wherever I can, either film or record what I'm doing, and I listen to the audience. So what the guy said, hear it, but if you've done a recording, listen to it back and make then the judgment for yourself, whether that's right or not. Because at the end of the day, I'm doing comedy because I want to make people laugh. If they're not laughing, I'm not doing my job. And I did King Gong years ago at the Comedy Store, and I lasted just under 2 minutes. And you know what? I was happy with that because I gave the audience entertainment, because I got a massive cheer when I got gonged off. And I saw that as my job was to entertain an audience. They had some laughs. Yes, I stumbled one of my lines. Bang, bang, bang. I was off. Big cheers. We can go to the bar. Done my job.
Yeah.
Whereas other people would look at it and say, shit, I was terrible. You have to get your ego out the way.
Yeah.
And this is where my TV background comes in. My job is to create TV programs, whatever, that engage, inspire, entertain an audience. As a comedian, you're creating comedy that's going to entertain an audience. And yes, you want to get something from it, but you're there for the audience. And when you shift from someone who's telling jokes to being a comedian, that's when you start doing it for the audience and not yourself. And that feels so much better.
Yeah, no, I agree, because the guy's advice was actually spot on.
Yeah.
Because I look back and I every time the second joke always got a nice amount of laughter, but never as strong as the first one. And when I look back, it's like you're not ending on your strongest point.
And this is why doing lots of gigs in a row is so valuable as a new comedian, because you get to say, okay, that joke didn't land quite. Let me tweak it a little bit. Do it again. Did it land better? No, tweak it again. Did it land better? Yes. Try it again. Is it landing better? Yes. Now I know that joke works. That's why. Have you ever seen The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel? It's a Netflix series. It's a series it's set in the kind of 1950s, about this New York Jewish married woman who ends up separating from her husband. He thinks he's a comedian, but she's the funny one. And there is a sequence in about episode 3 or 4 when they show the same bit of set over and over again over many different nights. And it's slowly shifting and getting better. And that's such a beautiful sequence to show how a joke evolves. I don't know if something I write is funny or not. Yeah, with my experience, I would assume or think it would be. But I don't know it's funny until I've had that laugh back from an audience. And sometimes it might just be one word that I change that will get a bigger laugh. And that's why you keep doing it over and over again, because you're tweaking it until you get it to work.
Yeah. So open mic comedy and disability. I've been thinking about this and I'm not sure how to talk about it because it doesn't affect me personally.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to feel like I'm speaking on behalf of others.
Okay. So you want my opinion on so a few things. There are quite a few alternate nights. So you have girl power, you have nights on different sexualities, horror nights, all that kind of stuff. There are only two, as I'm aware of, nights that are designed just for disabled comics. So Mark Nicholas runs one in somewhere down southeast London, and Benny Shakes does one up in Leicester called Disabled Cons, and he takes that to Edinburgh as well. The biggest issue, I think disabled comics are brilliant. I think there should be more of them. I want to push the boat on it all because it's giving an audience something different that they don't expect that they may learn from.
Yeah.
Problem with London, a lot of venues are not accessible. So I've talked to Carl about doing a disabled comedy night. He said, I can't find a venue that's fully accessible. So me, I'm fortunate. I'm mobile. Yeah, I have a spine condition. It's a bit of a struggle sometimes for me to get my box down the stage, but I'll down the stairs into the basement. But if I need to, I'll ask someone to do it for me. But I can get down. But if you have someone in a wheelchair user, it's impossible. There are some really good, I've seen visually impaired comics, deaf comic, people with non-visible conditions, neurodiversity. I think it creates different and more interesting comedy. And I kind of love it when the comedians push the edge of it and make the audience feel uncomfortable, because bloody hell, they should feel uncomfortable by the attitude. Yeah. So, but what I don't like is when a non-disabled comedian starts making jokes about disability. I can make them because I'm coming from my experience. Going to my TV writing and comedy, for me, my focus in my TV work is writing and directing with disabled talent. So for me, I want to use comedy to create great characters, engaging entertaining programs where some of the characters have a disability, but it's never about that, so that audiences get to see an aspect of life that they may not have experience of. So I'll give you an example. One of my friends is a documentary maker. He's a wheelchair user, and he did a documentary about disability. And he interviewed one woman who was in her 40s, who'd had a horse riding accident and ended up in a wheelchair. And she said, I'm the first disabled person I've met. Now, when you have that in society and people haven't met or haven't had experience or haven't connected, there is fear. It's like different ethnic groups. If you've not had in the past, if you've not been surrounded by different nationalities or religions or whatever, when there's unknown, there's sometimes fear. And then when there's fear, there's prejudice and stuff like that. So for me, I'm me. I don't see myself disabled. I'm just, my body's a bit quirky. So what?
Yeah.
So the more mainstream, the more normal it is, the less of an issue it is.
I always think about somebody in a wheelchair that wants to do stand-up comedy. And I was thinking about this before this chat, was like, where could they perform? Especially in London, you kind of go, because every single comedy night I can think of, through no fault of the promoter, is upstairs or downstairs.
Are you aware of Steve Renke? He was in Jerk. He's got quite severe cerebral palsy. He's on the comedy circuit. He really struggles to walk and move, very shaky. And his style is to shock the audience, make it even more uncomfortable. He loves making audiences feel uncomfortable. I saw him at the King's Head, downstairs at the King's Head, and it's in the basement. And he had to crawl up the stairs to get up the stairs. It was really sad to see that. That was the only way. He was on his hands and knees trying to get up the stairs. That was the only way he could get to that venue. Where's the disability? Not him. The venue,
No.
the venue is disabling him. And
Yes.
there's this social model of disability where actually, if society was built so that things were accessible, there would be less disability. Yes, people would still have their conditions, but they wouldn't be disabled from doing stuff.
Yeah, it makes me sad when I think about how many people are out there we're missing out on being entertained by.
And learning from. And
just because of stairs in a way and things like that that make things more difficult for a certain portion of society.
But there are other comedians that you may not realize have a disability, but there's a lot of neurodiversity out there. And in a funny kind of way, I think most comedians have some form of neurodiversity because our minds work in a certain way that other people don't. And it's, I'm dyslexic. I'm probably just slightly on the spectrum, but you get all different levels. And some comedians, Sally Ann Fellows, for example, she's proud of the fact she's different. And her stuff is so, it's brilliant, Yeah. So, we all bring something different to the stage, and I don't touch on my disability that much. I touch on the fact that I'm short and I'm a bit quirky looking. I try to misdirect the audience, to get them to think in a certain way and then throw them another. So I have a line, you probably noticed I'm a bit unusual. That's right, I'm a single dad. Unusual, they're thinking, sure, But with all my jokes on being disabled and all my jokes on all the different girlfriends and stuff like that I have, I then throw in, and this is the big one at the end, I guess all this talk of sex and having a big penis, there are women in the audience that are thinking, would I, should I, maybe could I have sex with a disabled man? Buy me a drink after, I might let you. And that's my closing. So I've kind of pulled it back on that because I'm trying to change perceptions,
Yeah.
And if I get lucky, even better. Not happened yet. I got a bloke buy me a drink once. Not quite what I was after.
So with working in television and with disability in television, how are there particular struggles with that?
So there is. I'm very involved in access and inclusion within TV. There's some amazing groups. There's a thing called the TV Access Project, which the main broadcasters and streamers have signed up to. So ITV, Channel 4, Netflix, Amazon, stuff like that. And they have signed up to a pledge to make studios and facilities more accessible, to have a thing called an access coordinator, which is a specific role in production that looks after the team with specific focus on talking with disabled contributors or crew to make sure their access needs are looked after. I'm very involved in that. There's another group called the Deaf and Disabled People Working in Television group, which I'm quite an active member of. And broadcasters are screaming out for more scripts, stories, programs which feature disabled characters or have disabled crew, because 25% of the UK population have a disability. 20% of the UK working population have a disability. 6% of the TV industry behind the camera have a disability. Something like 8% in front of the camera. It's shocking. It's the one minority that you don't have to be born into that isn't fully represented on television yet. They've been through, sex, gender, ethnicity, religion, stuff like that. And all that is, statistically, is getting more balanced. But disability is always the last one on the list. So I'm very active in making that more so. And I say I'm a writer-director specializing with working with disabled talent because I don't fear it. A lot of people fear it because they don't know it. And I was having this conversation a while ago. I was doing another podcast and I was saying to the guy that disability has a kind of aura around it, a bit like death. We all know death is going to happen to us. But we don't want to talk about it because maybe superstitiously it might make it happen quicker. I think disability has a similar vibe around it. It's like we all know it's possible that something could happen, that we end up with a disability, but we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to face it because, it might make it happen. So there is that. And that's why I want to kind of shake things up and change things, because yes, it could happen, but actually it's happened, or a lot of people are already living it. And you know what? Nothing wrong with this. What's wrong with this is people's attitudes towards us.
Yeah, I get that completely. It's something I think the open mic circuit needs to address in reality. It needs to find more. There needs to be more venues that are more accessible, and a way of getting more and more people involved in it. Because, like you say, the venue's the bit that's being disabled, but there has to be venues out there that are accessible. It's just making that part of the venue. So, for example, you pick your average pub where you walk in on one level and there's a room upstairs and a room downstairs.
Yeah.
Maybe have a night where the comedy happens on that main level, where a wheelchair can get in and people can perform. And then if those people that don't want to be involved in the comedy, go and drink upstairs or downstairs for a change.
Yeah. You're right. Mark Nicholas, he does his gig in a library, which is fully accessible and stuff. I don't know what Benny does, because I've not been up and done his show yet, but I will at some point. Hey, Benny, I'm available. One other thing, yes, there needs to be more disabled comedians on the circuit, but I don't think their material necessarily has to have anything to do with disability. It could just be funny. So, for example, if I see a woman in a hijab doing comedy, but it's got nothing to do with her religion, she's just talking about stuff, I'm still getting an experience of someone I don't have much experience of, and learning more about them and understanding more, and it's opening up my mind. So someone with a wheelchair on stage who does a whole routine about Ipswich Town Football Club, for example, is still fine, and they just happen to be in a wheelchair, and it's demystifying stuff. So I think, in certain stand-up courses, they always say address the obvious at the beginning, because, the audience will always be thinking about it unless you do. So, for me, because I'm short, I always ask the MC to leave the microphone high. And when I walk up on stage, I just look up it and say, and make a little thing of it, and said, as I bring it down, I said, I guess they were expecting someone taller. I'm all they could get at short notice. And it's done and dusted, and then I'm into my routine. So, you might need something. Using the Ipswich Town wheelchair user, saying, don't really need this, but it gets me a great seat at the match. You know, and they were onto the. So for me, making venues more accessible and allowing more differently abled people on stage will be great for the audiences.
Yeah, by all means. When I talk about, I'm not necessarily talking about people coming on and talking about being disabled, but just having more people with worldly wide experiences that you have not experienced or not heard.
Mm-hmm.
And allowing them to do the same thing that somebody that is, I don't know what the correct terms are these days, and a more able-bodied person can do, and just be inclusive with it all. I think that's the way it needs to kind of go. I'm always very wary about saying certain words in so.
And this is the problem. This is the problem. And I'm not saying it's your problem or you have a problem. The problem is people are scared of saying the wrong things, therefore they say nothing. And for me, that's worse than people saying the wrong thing. Because I would much rather say, you, Mark, you just put your hands up and say, Neil, I'm sorry, I might say the wrong thing. I'm sorry, I'm not meaning any offense. But can I ... what? I would much rather that than people making assumptions or kind of shy away from what they're really thinking, feeling. Because I know, I've had experiences, and this is something that it gives an example. I've gone to venues to do a gig that I've not been to before, so people don't know me. And I've been in the bar and no one's come up to talk to me because I look a little bit different. I'll do my set and then everyone wants to talk to me, and there's that. And it's like, so being visual and being there and being, I don't know, it's just something that I wanted to share, but I'm not really sure what the point of it is. So if people see me at a gig, come up and talk to me, and don't be a stupid ass, especially young women, petite, preferably, available.
Okay. So what are your actual ambitions then on the comedy circuit for going forward in the future?
So I want to keep doing comedy gigs because it keeps my comedy muscles working. But my real focus is on my writing, the comedy TV writing, and potentially comedy writing / performing. There are and because I have a lot of connections with the comedy commissioners, they're aware of what I do, the style that I write. And I've written a sitcom that's based on me as a single dad, bringing up my 2 kids who both tower over me. And one of the commissioning editors looked at me when we were chatting. He said, "Do you act?" Because one of the things that comedy likes are writer performers. So I'm not saying that will happen, but I need to keep performing. And if I then write something and I can sit in one of the characters, it's stronger. Yeah. I would never presume that I will get the role. But if a broadcaster said, we got 4 people, we're going to screen test, one of them is you, and they then decide I'm right for the role, I'll do it. So I need to keep my performance muscles going as well. I want to be taking my prop box. So I have this vision. I want to get a camper van. I know it sounds silly. I want to get a camper van and trundle around the country, because I can be wherever I want writing. As long as I've got a Wi-Fi connection and my laptop, I can write anywhere. And as I travel around, I find comedy venues where I take my box in and I wow them with 10 or 15 minutes of prop comedy, which they've not seen before. And sometimes I get paid, and sometimes I get a free meal and a drink and whatever. And I'm just bringing laughter to people, in all different venues, to see how it goes and see how it grows. I'm not interested in a Netflix special. I'm not interested in, being live at an Apollo. However, Dave, the TV channel, has done a couple of comedy showcases for disabled comedians. If I could get on that and do my 10-minute set, then I'd be more than happy. But you asked me about my comedy ambitions, but actually my main ambitions are in TV. My thing is to write engaging, entertaining comedy drama or comedy that features strong disabled characters, not necessarily about their disability, but stories that people don't normally see on TV, and they get sucked into them and they get really engaged by them. And then I slap them in the face with something they haven't thought of, and they go, "Oh, I didn't see that." And therefore I'm changing perceptions. And I mentioned this sitcom about the single dad. That's existing. I'm writing a drama at the moment with support from the BBC, which is set in a children's hospital, and the lead character was an ex-patient of the children's hospital, and he's now a young adult. And yes, he has a very slightly visible, but very slightly disability. But for him, it's more about the trauma of what he went through as a child that's affecting him more than the physical side. And I'm bringing those stories because stories are the way things change. People love stories. They love hearing stories. They love to be taken on. I want audience to laugh and cry in equal measure. And if I can touch people emotionally, then they remember it. So one of the very first things I wrote and directed when I started in BBC was a program called Square One Television, which was a co-production with the Children's Television Workshop, who make Sesame Street. And they are the world's best at combining entertainment and education. And they said to me, if you can make the punchline of the scene or the dramatic climax of the scene coincide with the information you want the kids to know, they will remember it because it's that emotional connection that they connect the information with. So for me, I want to create emotional hits, it being laughter or a dramatic hit with the point, and then I'm changing perceptions. So I do that in my comedy on stage if I can, and I certainly do that in my writing.
Yeah.
And of course, I want to win a BAFTA for the most original screenplay to go with my nomination I've already got.
Hey, you never know.
Oh.
Yeah. If you was to do a big production or something on television, and you sit down with the producers and you go through all the details, and they'll ask you, what music do you want to walk onto the stage to? What do you pick? So
if I was like doing the Jonathan Ross show or something like that, I have met Jonathan. I could tell you a story about him if you wanted. I would walk onto "I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt." That would be it. I'm too sexy for my shirt.
That would certainly get a reaction.
It certainly would, yeah. And then when I sit down and say, Jonathan, you think your shirt sexy? Not as sexy as mine.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
We're kind of like winding down now. So there's one thing I like to ask all the comedians if they're up for a little bit of a challenge.
Oh, yeah, always up for a challenge.
I ask for any new listeners, I always ask comedians if they want to tell a joke on stage from this joke book.
Shit jokes.
The Little Book. The Little Book of Shit Jokes by Sid Finch. The comedians get to pick the joke by page number, so that they don't know what they're going to get until I read it out to them. Get to put it on stage, film it, tag us in it on Facebook, Instagram, etc., and see how it goes.
Okay,
how they incorporate it.
I'm not going to give you a page number, but I want the very last joke that hasn't been ticked. So go right to the back of the book, and whatever the very last joke is that hasn't been selected, I'll have that one.
Okay. The very last joke is: a woman enters a circus tent and asks for a job. Well, says the circus manager, what can you do? I can do a great impression of a bird, she replies. Says the circus manager, so can lots of people. Oh, well, says the woman as she flies away.
Okay.
Remember the title of the book?
Yes. So my challenge is, how do I make this into a prop comedy thing? Because that's what I want to do. So I got to do something with circus tent.
That's the challenge.
Trapeze or flying away. Yeah. Yeah. I'll find a way of doing it to fit in with my style.
Yes. That's the whole point of it, is that, I mean, if you need to change it slightly to make it fit, shorten it, but as long as the premise stays the same, it's all good.
Yeah.
Lastly, where can people find you and find your stuff?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Neil Ben 10. So that's Neil Ben with one N and then the number 10 thing. I have a website, which is neilben.com. neilben.com, so you can see more of my TV stuff. And sorry, I'm too old to do kind of Twitter or X or whatever, or Insta or anything like that. But find me at the comedy circuits, and find me on internet dating sites. I don't know. Yeah, no, you can get me through the website, and if you really want me, and I've obviously got quite a profile on the G&B pages because I'm headlining there quite a lot now and stuff. Yeah, just find me through that. So it's Neil Ben, one N in Ben. Yeah. And if anyone runs a TV production company, is looking for a great sitcom comedy drama or a comedy heist, which is brilliant, which I've written as well, which is a lot of fun. It's about a group of disabled master criminals who get away with murder, not literally, because no one suspects them. And that's written as well. And that's had some interest by a couple of broadcasters, but I don't have a production company on board yet. So I'm looking for some production companies to work with.
Excellent. Cool. You can find us on Instagram at Open Mic Comedy Pod. We've got a website, openmiccomedypod.com. I'll always ask this, whichever platform you're listening to this on, please give it a like, follow, subscribe, whichever the buttons do, whatever they do, but make them positive. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for your time today, Neil.
It's been fun, hasn't it?
It has.
You could have shaved, though, couldn't you? I mean, come on.
Don't give the secrets away. And for everybody else, I will speak to you all again very, very soon.